Yep, whenever you're ready.
All right. So first, tell me your full name, your title, and your role in the Christian ministry.
Sure. Bishop Darren A. Ferguson. I am the pastor of Mount Carmel Baptist Church in Far Rockaway, New York.
All right. Tell me a little bit about yourself, your background, where you were born and raised. Tell me about your family.
Harlem boy, born and raised. Raised by a single mother. My dad was a cop. Um, Came up in Harlem in the Bronx. Ended up dropping out of high school. Got into some trouble. But the Lord called me to ministry while I was incarcerated, and I've been doing this work for about 20 years now.
Good. All right. So we're gonna just jump straight into the meat of this. Um, why do you think the Christian church should pay attention to unplanned pregnancy?
I think the Christian church has to pay attention to unplanned pregnancies because we don't have enough difficult dialogues about things like sex. And we don't have those dialogues with our children. We generally skirt around those things. We preach abstinence or we preach wait until you're married. And unless that's backed up by some data, by some inspiration, by some having some real conversations with our young people, it really avails nothing because the fact of the matter is most of us did not wait until we were married to have sex. Most of us, including myself, my daughter was born out of wedlock and her pregnancy, the pregnancy that resulted in my daughter was unplanned. And nobody had ever had those conversations with me. So I think it's important that we have those dialogues, have those conversations with parents, with children about sex itself. Because until you have the conversation about sex, the conversation about unplanned pregnancy is a moot point. But you have to have the conversation about sex first and then build upon that to talk about unplanned pregnancies.
So why do you think it's uncomfortable for people to talk about it in the church, especially church people?
Because we've been taught in this society that we live in that sex is a dirty word. Sex is something dirty. When we say sex, we automatically think the worst thing. Not a beautiful joining between a man and a woman that expresses their love, but we think about pornography, and we think about twerking, and we think about all the things that they put in the media about sex. And we think about the way they sell sex and use it as a tool. But sex was something, is a gift given to us by God that allows us to express our love one for another. So the church is uncomfortable talking about sex because the church has never really dealt with what sex is.
So, what is the experience of young teenage girls and boys in churches that ignore these topics? And how do you think they feel?
I could give you the best possible example I could give about when I first got to Mount Carmel, maybe 8 years ago when I first became pastor. There was a young lady there who was about 16 and she was pregnant. And she came to church one Sunday and she said to me before service, she said, "I really don't want to be here." And I said, "Why?" She said, "Because I'm 16 and I'm pregnant and I want people looking at me funny." And that bothered me. It bothered me on so many levels. It bothered me on one level because I felt like if any conversation was supposed to be had with that young lady about pregnancy and about sex should have happened, and it didn't happen. So that was a moot point. So now our job as the church is not to belittle her or embarrass her or ostracize her about her pregnancy, but our job is to help her bring forth a healthy baby. So I literally, during altar call, grabbed her, pulled her up in front of the church, put my arms around her, embraced her, kissed her, and told the church, "You have no right to say anything negative about this young lady. That is not our job. Our job is to help her bring forth a happy, healthy baby." And that's what I think the church's role is. We need to have those difficult conversations first. And if we don't have them, then we're supposed to be loving, nurturing environments for babies to be born.
So, do you think there's a lack of believing in the church having an open door policy, and do you think it's like something that we can somehow relate to the kids? Like, hey, we're gonna embrace you. We're gonna work through this. We're gonna get better from it. I mean, and how do we get that message to our young people that it's an open door policy, that we're here for you?
Yeah, I'm going to get in trouble with this with a lot of my very traditional, hardline, denominational friends. But here's what I believe. I believe that the church has become so formal in some ways that we're not a trusted resource for our children. Case in point, I used to be the youth minister at Abyssinian Baptist Church. And Dr. Butts, my pastor, and I were walking through the church one day, and a young person came to me and said, "Yo, Ferg, what's up, man? Da 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 da." And so Dr. Butts looked at me with a raised eyebrow, and he said, "Ferg?" And I said, "That's what they call me." And he said, "Shouldn't they call you Reverend Ferguson?" And I said, Doc, they will tell Ferg that they're having sex. They'll tell Ferg that they smoke weed. They'll tell Ferg that they did something wrong. They'll tell Ferg that they failed the class. They won't tell Reverend Ferguson that. So the trade-off for me was to trade the formality and the desire to be called by a title for the realness, for the being a trusted resource, for being somebody that they could relate to, even as somebody who is much older than them. And I still do that and employ that today. In my work here at the college, at LaGuardia Community College, in my work at the church, I always tell young people, be yourself, speak for yourself, and I'm not hung up on title and position. I do believe in tradition. I do believe in standards. I do believe that there's certain things that certain way that we're supposed to act and behave within the ecclesiastical, hierarchy. But that is not more important than the human element of relating to people exactly where they are.
So, with that said, I mean, do you have any programs in place that speak to these issues, or what kind of program do you think is needed for teen and unplanned pregnancy?
The thing that we've done, and it wasn't as a result of dealing directly with teen or unplanned pregnancy, but it's a big part of what we do. We started at Mount Carmel, we started something called the Josiah Generation Rites of Passage Program. It was designed for 11 to 17-year-olds, and it's a 9-month program, and there's modules. So spiritual grounding module, there's a African American history module, there's a module of the Black Church in America, and there's a module on sex and sexuality. And in that module, we have to ask the parents' permission, because not all parents want those children having those conversations. We talk about everything from LGBTQ issues to sexuality, sexually transmitted diseases, and unplanned pregnancies. And we deal with it in a way that kids can understand. Of course, we have to deal with the, children, they're young, so they're giggling and stuff like that. But when you get past because the giggling is not because they think it's funny, the giggling is because they're uncomfortable, because they don't know how to act, they don't know how to respond when an adult is having this conversation with them and asking them to respond and not talking at them, but wanting to have a dialogue. So what happens is, after the giggling is over, they start asking some serious questions. They start asking some serious things. They want to know, well, what happens when everybody wants me to have sex because everybody else is doing it? I feel like there's something wrong with me because I'm not doing it. And then I'm able to hold up to them my daughter, who's 26, who'll be 27, who went away 4 years of college, and she's still a virgin, and proud of it. And not proud of it because something's wrong with her, but proud of it that that's a choice, that's a decision that she made because she wants to keep herself in a certain way in preparation for whoever she decides to marry. Or if she doesn't decide to get married, that's completely up to her. But being able to hold somebody up to the young people like that and say, this is the alternative to unplanned pregnancies. This is how you can be if you choose to be. And that's not a walk that everybody's going to take. Celibacy is not, I've heard somebody say in the church that celibacy is a gift, right? And it's a gift that most of us don't have, right? So we have to be very careful about what's the fine line between abstinence and birth control? What's the fine line between saying that you're supposed to stay without a sexual partner until you're married, or saying that if you have a sexual partner before you're married, that you're supposed to protect them and yourself from both sexually transmitted diseases and unplanned pregnancies? And that's a fine line, because traditionally the church has always said you can't have sex until you're married. And if we're talking about anything but that, then we're outside of what God wants for us, and we can't have that conversation. And that is a very dangerous position to take.
Yeah. It doesn't really deal with the confines of reality.
No.
Yeah.
The reality is that our children are going to have sex. The reality is that most young people are going to start indulging in some sort of sexual activity somewhere between the ages of 13 and 16. The truth is that there's nothing we can do about it. The truth is we could be mad about it, we could pray about it, we could shout about it, holler, sing songs about it, and hold up examples of young people who did not do it. But the fact of the matter is 90%, maybe even more than that, of young people are going to indulge in sexual activity. So we have to find what is our level of care. Our level of care has to be talking about abstinence. Our level of care has to be talking about birth control. Our level of care has to be talking about sexually transmitted diseases, and talking about everything from the really uncomfortable stuff like oral sex and anal sex, all the way up to talking about unplanned pregnancies. We have to have all of those conversations, and I believe it's the church's job to have those conversations. And if we don't, we're doing our children a disservice because they're going to have the conversation somewhere else where they're not protected, where they're not loved, and where somebody doesn't want the best for them. They're going to have those conversations in places where people are going to be talking about indulging in those things rather than what they are and having a real dialogue about how they should carry themselves.
So you were saying something interesting, like you've encountered a couple situations where you know, have had people come in pregnant, and so just, you know, speak to that a little bit. Tell me, like, you know, what kind of experiences you've had with, you know, a man or a boy or a girl, young man, young woman coming to you saying, "Hey, Bird, I'm pregnant," or "I got my girlfriend pregnant."
I think one of the most difficult ones for me is one of my goddaughters. She and I are really close. Her father passed away, so I'm effectively her dad. And she was in a relationship with the organist at our church. And they come to me, they said, "We need to talk to you after church." So I'm thinking they're going to talk to me, tell me that they're in a relationship, which I kind of already knew. They came to me not just to tell me that they were in a relationship, but that they were pregnant. And they wanted to get married. So, of course, we did everything we were supposed to do. But in the conversation, I had to tell them, listen, you know, this isn't the right way to do things. And I mean, I was glad that he wanted to do the right thing and marry her. I said, did you think about this when you have an unprotected sex? Did you have any conversations about child rearing, childbearing, any of those things? Did you talk about this? Is this something that you want right now? And unfortunately, it turned out to be something that they didn't want right now because they had 2 children and now they're separated. And part of the reason that they're separated is because he was not ready for the responsibility of being a husband and a father. And had I had the opportunity, had I taken the initiative to go and have this conversation with them a couple of months early when I thought they were messing around, and instead of waiting for them to come to me, it could have been a different outcome. I don't know. It could have been. And that's enough for me to say that I needed to change the way I was doing things.
So what's your relationship with them now?
My relationship with her and my 2 grandsons is great. I love them. She has decided to be celibate and not to engage in any sexual contact with anyone until she's married, until she, you know, and I respect her for that. My relationship with him is strained. You know, he thinks I'm angry with him, and I am. But I still love him. And he has 3 children now because he came into the relationship with the child already. And he's young. And nobody's having these conversations with these young brothers. So now I take it upon myself to the young men in the church, 12, 13, 14, the young men who we have in our Rites of Passage program, even the young men here at the college who I get the opportunity to talk to. I talk to them about making sure that if you are planning on having children, that you plan on having children. Not just, you know, I mean, too many children are born from oops. You know, too many children are born from, dad, that was that night I didn't wear a condom, dad. You know, we really need to think more strategically about it. And one of the things that I'm telling young people more and more, and this is another difficult dialogue the church doesn't want to have, is that sexual contact is far too often linked to alcohol. Alcohol drops your inhibitions, right? And you do things when you've had a few drinks that you wouldn't do when you're sober. So we need to have all of those things lead into unplanned pregnancy, and the fact that you know, we still have to deal with a culture of rape that I believe that we have in this country. And why I say we have a culture of rape is because young men still think it's all right to touch girls unwanted. Young men still think it's all right to ogle girls in a way that makes them uncomfortable. Young men still objectify young women and use them as sex objects. And a lot of that is due to the amount of pornography that they have access to just on their smartphones. Part of it is due to the fact of what movies and television tells them oftentimes, because we see this wanted sexuality and everything from, you know, Zane's The Jump Off that's on cable to different movies that we see, you know, Why Did I Get Married, you know, who's sticking who, and then of course then is the unreality of reality television, right? When you got quote unquote reality stars making porn videos. All of that stuff plays into the concept that women are here for the express purpose of pleasing men, and that's not true. we have to really teach our young boys to respect women on a completely different level. And it goes beyond just saying treat her like a queen. It goes beyond just saying, oh, treat her like you want somebody to treat your mother, your sister. It really goes into dealing with really basic things that we are taught from birth on a very subconscious level that we don't even realize until we get older and we start engaging in sexual behavior.
Yeah, that actually goes into my next question, which was how do we connect with the young men in this situation? Because oftentimes you see like the ladies bear the majority of the burden
Yeah.
when there's a pregnancy, a teen pregnancy, unwanted pregnancy. So how do we connect to the young men and show them like, hey, this is how you treat women. This is your responsibility too. It takes two to tango. Like how do we speak to the young men?
A few things. One is effective fatherhood. And that goes beyond just the biological parent. I mean, we all know all of the issues and all of the statistics and all of the things that we heard and all the myths that we heard about black fathers, most of which are not true. Black men love their sons and they love their daughters. End of story. Now, whether or not they're connected to them is a whole nother story. But effective fatherhood is the first line of defense. Boys don't get the B men unless they get the C men. I believe that. And I don't care what the person's sexual preference is, because I already hear the haters in my head saying, well, suppose he's gay. Well, that has nothing to do with anything. Every child, no matter what their orientation is, deserves to be fathered. Period. End of story, point blank. And I think fatherhood, when we're talking about heterosexual men who identify with their birth assigned gender, we're talking about that, then we're talking about effective fatherhood is the first line of defense to teach them to be respectful towards women. The second line of defense is changing our educational system to teach sexual health in a way that's productive and not just biology. And teaching about it from an emotional standpoint, a psychological standpoint, teaching people the emotional, psychological changes that you go through during sex. We don't talk about this stuff. All we talk about is the physical stuff because that's the fun stuff, supposedly, right? We have to talk about the psychological issues that we have around sex. We have to talk about molestation, which is very prevalent in our society, in African American communities, that we don't talk about. We always talk about that uncle, don't leave the kids around Uncle so-and-so. But the truth of the matter is that's something that we got to deal with because there's so many children, male and female, who've been molested in some way, and that affects their sexual life when they get older. And we don't want to talk about it. We have to talk about mental health. We have to indulge in and be a society where we're not afraid to go and get ourselves checked out from the neck up and not just from the neck down. Because being psychologically healthy is you can't be sexually healthy if you're not psychologically healthy, because so much of sex is psychological and emotional. So it's all of those things. And then from a Christian perspective, difficult dialogues within the church, prayer, lots of prayer, and not just prayer where we're asking God to change them, fix them, do something to them, but I believe that recognizing that the power in prayer is what we do when we get up from our knees and going out and doing something about it. Praying and asking God for direction, praying and asking God for guidance, praying and asking God, how do we effectively talk to our young people, and actually going out and doing it and not just talking about it and taking it outside of the confines of the church. One of the things that we have to do if we're going to address any issue from race to white privilege to violence to unplanned pregnancy is we have to stop having church and start being the church. We got to stop church being a social club on Sunday and being some grand experience that you go through on church on Sunday, and then Monday through Saturday there's nothing except maybe a Bible study or conference call or whatever else you do. But we have to make Christianity not a religion but a way of life. And I think those things give us the springboard to starting to address these issues.
So you said stop having church and start being a church. So being a church, what does that look like? I mean, especially in the context of,
Sure. Being the church means doing the work of an evangelist, going out and telling the good news. But it also means being very closely connected to Jesus' words in Matthew 25:31-46. He says, I was hungry and you didn't feed me. I was thirsty and you didn't give me drink. I was sick and you didn't come and see me. I was in jail and you didn't check on me. And the disciples said, well, Jesus, when did you do all of that? When would that happen? We would have definitely checked on you. And he said, as much as you've done it to the least of these, you've done it to me. All of those things, visiting the sick, feeding the hungry, clothing the naked, giving people drink when they're thirsty, going to see, it has nothing to do with worship service on Sunday. Those are things that we have to do outside of they have to be a part of our way of life. That's being the church. Because they could tear down every church building in the world. That doesn't stop us from being the church. Just because you don't have a building doesn't stop you from being what God called you to be. Just because you don't have a pulpit to stand behind doesn't stop me from being a pastor or a bishop. I'm a pastor or bishop wherever I go. I don't need a pulpit. I don't need a building. I don't need nothing. All I need is my God-given senses, my God-given wisdom, and the ability to express myself and to draw people to Christ. And guess what? Drawing the people to Christ has a whole lot more to do with what I do than what I say.
So be a community, be a family.
Yes, all of those things. The first church is the family.
So we're gonna fast forward and get back to, if a congregation was going to take one step to start working on these issues, what would they do? What should they do?
I would have a town hall meeting. Matter of fact, I'm thinking about doing it in the fall. Having a town hall meeting in my church and for the surrounding community around difficult dialogues, money, sex, anger, right? And in the sexual thing, have the children present and really start to talk about, we can look at the scriptures, what does the scriptures say about sex, but we have to be very careful with that because we have to realize that the Bible is a very patriarchal document. And 2,000 years ago when it was committed to writing, and over 2,000 if you're talking about the First Testament, right, that women were not considered whole equal partners. So we have to be careful with some of the stuff. That doesn't mean it's null and void. It just means we have to be careful in terms of interpretation. And we need to have some difficult dialogues with our churches about sex and really sit down and talk about it in a real way, not be embarrassed about it, not, oh, we can't do that here. Yeah, we can do that here because they're doing it somewhere. They're doing it places where they don't have God as their guide and they don't have the Bible as their instruction. So why not have that dialogue, that difficult discussion, that uncomfortable conversation in the place where we say God dwells? Why not have it there? If we have it there, I think we start to change things and we start to change people's perspectives, and then people won't be afraid to bring those issues to the church when they arise in their or everyday lives.
Absolutely. So do you think the Bible speaks to these issues? Is there a theological perspective on teen and unplanned pregnancy?
Yeah. Yes. The theological explanation, the theological argument, the theological the mandate that's been put out is abstinence, no sex before marriage. And that has no basis in reality. Paul said it's better to marry than to burn. Yes. I do believe in marriage. Yes. I do believe in the family. Yes. But the fact of the matter is that hormones are more powerful than principles when you talk about teenagers. I know they were for me. I started when I was 15. So I think that we have to really begin to start to look at so yes, abstinence is the standard. Yes. Having children within wedlock is the standard. But we need to have a loving, nurturing, embracing, and effective thought process to think through when we don't meet the standard. So what do we do when somebody doesn't meet the standard? We ostracize them, throw them out the church. What do we do when somebody doesn't meet the standard? They say they're not a Christian no more, take away the little Christian card, take away the Bible and tell them don't come to church no more. Don't say hallelujah, you can't do that. I think that, yes. So what do we do when we don't, right, what do we do when they don't meet the standard? We have to have the same way that we're supposed, the Bible says, I believe it's Galatians 6:1, it says, when a brother or sister is overtaken in a fault, ye who are spiritual, restore such a one with meekness, considering yourself, lest ye also be tempted. I don't care how married you are prone, or it's possible that you can commit adultery. I don't care how Holy Ghost filled you are, you can get somebody pregnant that ain't your wife. And you can get pregnant by somebody that ain't your husband. So we need to have those conversations. So we have to, as the church, have to decide, what do we do when somebody doesn't meet the standards? How do we restore them? And how do we do it lovingly and nurturingly? And how do we do it in a way that's restorative and not punitive? And once we have, I know what we do in our church. What we do in our church is we accept people as they are. We don't judge them. We love them. We tell them the standard. If they fail to meet the standard, we love them anyhow. The same way God loves us when we don't meet his standards. That's our standard. And I think every church needs to adopt a standard like that, a policy like that.
Yeah, that goes to my next question. What is the cause, practical, like moral, in society if the church fails to engage and speak to these issues?
Well, I don't even think there's a question of if the church has already failed. So what we're seeing is a direct result of the church's failure to address these issues on any level. So we're already looking at the failure. So now let's look at what the possible successes could be. We do not live in a society anymore where church is a standard of life. We have to attract people to church. We have to do marketing to get people to church, right? So I don't believe probably more people do not go to church regularly than go to church regularly in this country now. But for those who do, I think that we have to be unafraid to have those dialogues, because if we start having those dialogues, we start having it in a meaningful way, in a way that's effective, in a way that is nurturing and loving and redemptive. I think that you'll see more people come back to church because it'll mean something to them.
Absolutely. So do you have any like success stories, I guess, to put it like in those terms, in that word, like of somebody who was a teen, got pregnant, and they went on to persevere, and they had a testimony to tell about, they overcame that obstacle?
Yeah, there's a deacon in my church, Deacon Leela King. Maybe I shouldn't say her name, but the deacon in my church, and she got pregnant at 18 and 19. Family's very prominent in the church, still are. And her eldest son now is 31. She has a youngest son who's 25. Her oldest son has 2 children. He's not married, but he has 2 children. He's a great father. He's a correction officer. The youngest son just got married last November. He married a young woman who already has a child, and they're pregnant. They're going to have a baby. And she talks very candidly about being ostracized in the church as a young woman. And when we had one of those difficult dialogues in the church, she really got up before the church and cried and said, "I'm so glad we're having this conversation." And now she is the person who I send young women to who may be pregnant out of wedlock and don't know what to do and feel some kind of way about coming to church. So that's a success story, because someone has turned their pain into possibilities. And someone who was victimized almost by the church was able to go on to become a deacon in the church, be a great leader in the church, and be a big help to people who are similarly situated to what she went through when she was 19.
So as a man, how do you think other men, especially male pastors, should engage on these issues?
Lovingly, with respect to women. The church is still a very patriarchal place, and we still, in a lot of denominations, not where we should be in the way we treat women. And again, I know I'm gonna make some of my preacher buddies mad, but fight me, right? I think that male pastors need to engage. I have a very strong staff with female ministers on it, and when I don't get something, I go to them. When it's a woman's issue that I don't understand, I don't even try. I can't relate, so I don't. So I let them relate to those issues, and I let them load my lip, inform me, teach me, train me, show me how I should be dealing with this. Or maybe show me that I shouldn't be dealing with this at all. Let me admit that and let somebody else deal with it. And then I handle it as somebody who makes the referral as opposed to the point person. I think those are some of the things. And again, stop shying away from difficult conversations. We have to stop doing that. I cannot emphasize that enough. We have to stop shying away from difficult dialogues, because as long as we do, the church is going to remain irrelevant in too many areas.
Yeah. No, appreciate your time. I mean, is there anything else you want to share?
Nah, I think I got it all out.
All right, cool.
Good, brother. You need to be on World News Tonight with ABC.